Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Let's recite together. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devam saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirashe nashtapreshu abdeshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Okay, I know the microphone needs to be near me, but I'm also short, so I want to be able to see my screen. The challenges in material life for those of us that are short-bodied. So, we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, verses 30 and 31. We have 2 verses, so we'll do repetition for the first, and then we'll just read the second one together, if that's okay. So, Aham tadvad vikurvanan Mano vaikarikad babut Vaikarikascha jev deva Artabhyavanjanam jataha Aham tadvad vikurvanan Mano vaikarikad abut Vaikarikascha je deva Artabhyavanjanam jataha. Please chant.
Aham tadvad
Vakurvanam
Mano
Vaikarikadabhut Vaikarikascha ye deva Artabhyavanjanam jataha. Vaikarikadabhut Vaikarikascha ye deva Artabhyavanjanam jataha. Vaishnavas? Aham tadvad vikurvanam Mano vaikarikadabhut Vaikarikascha ye deva Artabhyavanjanam jataha. Aham tadvad vikurvanam Mano vaikarikadabhut Vaikarikascha ye deva Artabhyavanjanam jataha. Aham tadvad vikurvanam Vaikarikadabhut
Vaikarikascha ye deva
Artabhyavanjanam jataha. Synonyms. Aham tadvat, from the principle of false ego. Vikurvanat, by transformation. Manaha, the mind. Vaikarikat, by the interaction with the mode of goodness. Abhut, generated. Vaikarikaha, by interaction with goodness. Cha, also. Ye, all these. Devaha, demigods. Artha, the phenomenon. Abhivyanjanam, physical knowledge. Jataha, the source. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The false ego is transformed into mind by interaction with the mode of goodness. All the demigods who control the phenomenal world are also products of the same principle, namely the interaction of false ego and the mode of goodness. Please repeat after me. The false ego is transformed into mind by interaction with the mode of goodness. All the demigods who control the phenomenal world are also products of the same principle, namely the interaction of false ego and the mode of goodness. So we have a short purport. False ego interacting with the different modes of material nature is the source of all materials in the phenomenal world. And then, like as I said, the second verse is very short and sweet, so if we can read it together, that would be great. Taija sanindriyaneva jnana karma mayanicha. That's it. That's it. So we won't do word for word just because it's so short. We'll go into the translation. The senses are certainly products of the mode of passion and false ego, and therefore philosophical speculative knowledge and fruitive activities are predominantly products of the mode of passion. So let's repeat this all together, please. The senses are certainly products of the mode of passion and false ego, and therefore philosophical speculative knowledge and fruitive activities are predominantly products of the mode of passion. And we have a nice long purport here from Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhupada. Okay, the chief function of the false ego is godlessness. When a person forgets his constitutional position as an eternally subordinate part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and wants to be happy independently, he functions in mainly two ways. He first attempts to act fruitively for personal gain or sense gratification, and after attempting such fruitive activities for a considerable time, when he is frustrated, he becomes a philosophical speculator and thinks himself to be on the same level as God. This false idea of becoming one with the Lord is the last snare of the illusory energy, which traps a living entity into the bondage of forgetfulness under the spell of false ego. The best means of liberation from the clutches of false ego is to give up the habit of philosophical speculation regarding the absolute truth. One should know definitely that the absolute truth is never realized by philosophical speculations of the imperfect egoistic person. The absolute truth, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is realized by hearing about him in all submission and love from a bona fide authority who is a representative of the 12 great authorities mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. By such an attempt only can one conquer the illusory energy of the Lord, although for others she is unsurpassable, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Shakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pashyata Disitarine Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dear devotees, I humbly ask for your blessings of every single one of you in this room and those of you who are watching virtually on YouTube. Please may I speak in this class in a way that glorifies God and inspires myself and others to serve Guru and Radha and Krishna. Haribol. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to serve all of you. I feel humbled, which is good. You should feel humbled when you're on the Vyasa-san, I think. So the two main points that I want to discuss today are the issues that are discussed in these two verses. So the two main issues that I found were false ego and forgetfulness. And then I would like to finish with some positives, because it's always nice to finish with something positive, which are the solutions, which are submission with love and devotional service. So why did I pick these points? Well, right there in the purport of verse 31, Prabhupada so beautifully illustrates the whole key thing that is forgetting, right? He says, we forget that we are part and parcel of Krishna. We forget that seeking our happiness away from him is not possible. True happiness, that is, right? Forgetting that working for our own pleasure instead of his is not the true goal in life. And worst of all, we forget that we are not in control of anything. We are not God. And all this is false ego, right? So Prabhupada just keeps bringing it home again and again. And why does he keep saying that? What's the word that we're talking about right now? Because we forget. Yes, exactly. So I know that in my personal experience, when I am feeling very anxious or nervous, it's usually because I forget that I am not in control, right? I can prepare as much as I can do as much as I can, and then finally I have to let it go and let God, as they say, right? So just let Krishna do it. So what are some shastra or some things from Srila Prabhupada that support this that I was able to find? I love searching through Vedabase. I don't know if anybody else is a Vedabase geek. No? Nobody else? Okay. Well, I love Vedabase. And in the Bhagavad Gita intro, Srila Prabhupada says, when we are materially contaminated, we are called conditioned. False consciousness is exhibited under the impression that I am a product of material nature. This is called false ego. So again, Srila Prabhupada gives us another way to understand false ego, understanding it within this quote, that we are not a product of material nature. Life comes from... Yeah, sorry, I had to do that because with Bhakti Marga Swami Maharaj here, you know, I love when he makes people have to guess what the next word is. So I was inspired by those classes, but we're not going to do it the whole time because I can't imitate. But that's just an honor. So we are spirit souls who are temporarily inhabiting material bodies. And these are basic principles that Srila Prabhupada keeps reinforcing. Why? Because we keep forgetting it, right? So we have that theme that's going on. Why are these things told to us again and again? Because we forget them. Why? Because we're conditioned, right, by the material nature. And that's okay. We can have compassion for ourselves and for others because of that. So another place where I found a really beautiful support to this by Srila Prabhupada is in Bhagavad Gita 3.27, both in the verse and in the purport. So the verse is, the translation is, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. So why did I want to include these quotes? Well, the first part of it is that reinforcing that we're not the doers, right? So as I mentioned, we need to let go of that ego, like I'm the one that's doing everything. No. I mean, even just me being here, as I said, like it's only by Krishna's mercy, right? Some of you who don't know me, less than 4 months ago, 3 months ago, I was bedridden, right? I had suffered a horrible injury where I just could not even get up to go up to the bathroom, right? And it was only by Krishna's mercy and the prayer of the Vaishnavas and beautiful kind of moving forward of things that I was able to heal enough to be here today, right? So it wasn't my part. I did my part, right? Like if they say, you know, God can move mountains, but you have to bring your shovel, right? So I did my part. I did my exercises, but really it was Krishna. And we forget that we're kind of brought down by these three gunas, right? Ignorance, passion, and the mode of goodness. They affect our thoughts. They affect our speech. They affect our actions. And he is really reinforcing, Srila Prabhupada, that under false ego, we forget about Krishna. I was hearing a class where somebody said that the worst punishment that we can incur as conditioned souls is to forget Krishna. And that really hit me in my heart, right? We forget about Krishna, and not only do we forget about him, but we take credit for everything in our lives. We forget to thank him for everything. I've heard that most people only remember God to blame him for what is going on wrong. But when things go right, we're quick to take credit for it, right? Everything's great because I did it. So I think it's a really important thing for us to remember that. Another verse from Srila Prabhupada that I thought really reinforced this was in Bhagavad Gita. And I always like to go back to Bhagavad Gita because that's where it all started for me, right? If it weren't for Bhagavad Gita and me getting to go to classes at 26 2nd Avenue, which at the time I didn't even know that it was this holy dham, like beautiful place. I just got to have that mercy unbeknownst. If it weren't for the Bhagavad Gita, I wouldn't be here. So in Bhagavad Gita 13, 8 through 12, in the purport, Prabhupada says, false ego means accepting this body as oneself. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, and is spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought, of course, to give up the false identification with this body. So again, this quote so beautifully reinforces Srila Prabhupada's message that he kept repeating. We are not this body. Literally had to keep reminding myself that when I was bedridden and in like level 9, 10 pain every single day. Just in between Mahamantras, just being like, I am not this body, I am not this body, I am not this body, right? So why do we have to keep saying that to ourselves? Because we forget it. We forget it. We forget that we are spirit souls. We forget that there are spirit souls all around us. We forget seeing each other as spirit souls, right? This is why we have so much discrimination going on in the material world right now, where people are judged by the color of their skin, by their sex, or even if they're in human bodies versus animal bodies, right? Oh, if you're in an animal body, that means that we can kill you and eat your flesh. Can't do that if you're in a human body. So do you know what I mean? Like that's that realization. So it's a really strong point that false ego is forgetting ourselves, our true nature, and instead just accepting ourselves as our bodies. So even though I was trying to smile through it and like bring it into an engaging way, these are really heavy truths, right? False ego and forgetfulness. And I know that both of these ideas could be classes in themselves. However, since we don't have time for that, and I want to kind of move on to what are the solutions, right? So let's just go into a beautiful quote that I wanted to share, and just in honor of being able to give class here amongst so many Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who are disciples of Srila Prabhupada. I was reading a book by your god sister, H.G.DamodarPriya Devi Prabhu, and she wrote a beautiful book called Harmony and the Bhagavad Gita, Lessons from a Life-Changing Move to the Wilderness. And it's a little bit long, this quote, so just bear with me and listen, because as many of you know who have met her, she's quite a poet, and the way that she writes things are just so beautifully done. So she says, ultimately, all of us, all Jiva Atmans, have one Father, God. As members of his extensive family, we are magnificently one. At the same time, because each of us, each Jiva Atma, is singular, inimitable individual, this family is beautifully diverse. Each Jiva Atma has a personal, unique, life-giving, reciprocally affectionate relationship with God and with other Jiva Atmas. The whole world becomes more interesting when, without expectations, we are well-wishers of other Jiva Atmas, and when we receive with joy whatever good wishes they give us. But even if another's affection for us is lacking, we can still remain an affectionate well-wisher of that person. Affection for the Jiva Atma, the spiritual soul, is in itself spiritual and sacred. Love and affection create a unity whose embrace overlooks differences. And it's this love and affection, reciprocated or not, that completes me and makes irrelevant the empty proposals of nihilism, fanaticism, terrorism, racism, enmity, and bias. Affection transcends this harmony, and affection creates harmony. Jai Vishaka Devi Dasi Prabhu. Thank you. So, moving on to what are the solutions, right? We've heard what is going on wrong. We are forgetting. We are involved in the false ego. But what are the solutions? So, in the purport of verse 31, again, Prabhupada says the solution right there very clearly. The absolute truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is realized by hearing about him in all submission and love from a bona fide authority. So the key thing here is hearing with submission and love from a bona fide authority. And we do that every day, right? Because we're listening to the Srimad Bhagavatam every day, and our bona fide authority is Srila Prabhupada, right? Srila Prabhupada and other teachers in our Sampradaya who are going by what has been taught before and before and before, right? So now the free will and the personalism comes from our choices. Are we listening with submission and love? Can we submit to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our ever well-wisher, who loves us more than all the mothers that we've ever had in all previous lifetimes that our soul has traveled in bodies? I mean, if you really let that sink in, and I'm really trying not to cry during this class, but it really hits you how much Krishna loves us. Okay. So, let's unpack this further again with some more Shastra, and like I said, let's go back to the Bhagavad Gita. So in Bhagavad Gita 2.71, or 271, sorry, in the purport, Prabhupada says, to understand one's actual position as the eternal servitor of Krishna, without falsely claiming this material body to be oneself, and without falsely claiming proprietorship over anything in the world, is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. So why do I share this? So to make it a little bit personal, since a lot of you don't know me, I think the only ones that maybe know me here are Sukada Prabhu and my husband, Paul Prabhu. So just so you can get to know me a little bit. When I first came to Krishna consciousness, way back when in January 2015, which wasn't really that long ago, which also blows my mind how merciful Krishna is, that there's no way back then that I thought I would be doing this right now, this service. Like, if you would have told me, I would have been like, ha, and then I would have left 26 Avenue. But anyway, that's besides that. So when I went to classes at 26 Avenue, and I was listening to the Bhagavad Gita, the words submit and submission came up a lot. A lot. Not only in the verses, but also in the devotees that I was interacting with. They were constantly telling me, submit to Krishna, submit to Krishna, submit to Krishna. And I didn't even know who Krishna was. Like, literally did not have a clue. I knew that Krishna was God, but I didn't know who was he? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I had this idea. I grew up Catholic, so that's the idea that I had. I didn't know about our beautiful, beautiful, sweet blue boy, Krishna. So I had a really hard time in the beginning, but the more that I started to get to know Krishna, the more that I learned about him, and then I learned about my true position as a servant to Krishna, and not only understanding Krishna's opulences and great powers, but most importantly, his love for me. Once I understood how much Krishna loves me, then I had no trouble with the words submit and submission, right? Because when someone loves you so much and is your ever well-wisher, how can you not submit to them? You know they will always take care of you, and you can serve them beautifully. And again, going back to Bhagavad Gita in 7.14 in the purport, Prabhupada, and I know that we're not going to have too much more time, so I'm not going to keep quoting it, but just to paraphrase, Prabhupada is talking about how a man or a person who is bound by their hands and feet, they cannot free themselves, right? So only someone who is unbound can free that person. And how does that happen? It's because Krishna, Lord Krishna, he sends his representative, who is who? The spiritual master, right? The spiritual teacher, who with their superior help and through devotional service, they can help that person be released from material nature. And I share this because, again, speaking from personal experience, I had a really hard time realizing that I was going to need other people's help in connecting to Krishna, right? I was coming from a space of like, I can do it. I'll figure it out myself, right? Like, don't you tell me what to do. What? I have to chant rounds? Nah, right? So I was like in that space. Thankfully, it didn't last long. By Krishna's mercy, it didn't last long. But I was in that space. I was like, no, I want to figure it out on my own. However, when I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, started interacting with the devotees, I understood that I couldn't do it myself because I was bound by material energy. Not only was I bound, at the time I didn't even understand the different modes of material energy. So I didn't even understand how I was bound. So how could I hope to free myself and free my heart to love Krishna if I didn't even know that, if I was bound? So I needed and I wanted the help of the Vaishnavas at that point, thankfully, Hare Krishna. And especially by the rescue of spiritual teacher, right, who can guide me in devotional service. And it's only through the mercy of Guru that I am here today doing this service, because I'm sure, as many of you have guessed, I was terrified out of my mind coming here. And if it weren't for the fact that I knew that Sukha Prabhu and my husband Paul Prabhu were here, and they weren't going to let me run out of that room, out of this temple room, then I might have. But then I also thought, I have to do this for Guru. I have to do this for Guru. Because how can I thank Guru if not by doing that which I fear the most? That's all I have to say for that. Like, if it weren't for Guru, then I wouldn't have been able to rediscover my loving relationship with Krishna and continue to try to grow it every day. And another beautiful quote, and this one I'll quote directly from Srila Prabhupada in his purport to 259. And the reason why I keep saying the numbers is because I don't know if anybody else is like a geek like me, but whenever I'm listening to classes, I always want to know like what verses everyone's quoting. So now you know, like, this is what's going to happen. If I have the mercy of giving another class, I always like to say the numbers because I like to be able to look it up before, again. So in 259 in the purport, Prabhupada says, one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness no longer has a taste for dead material things. I share this because I want to encourage our hope. The more we taste the beauty of the Lord, the more we connect everything to him. And then it's easier to keep going for that higher taste, as Srila Prabhupada said. And why is that important? Because without hope, how can we keep going further? As I shared from my personal example, I was bedridden. I had a horrible injury with my back, and I wasn't able to get up. And it was really hard to have hope. It was really hard to have hope, but thankfully my husband kept repeating to me, this all is temporary, right? You are not this material body, and this is temporary. So that was my hope at that point. But also later on, just knowing, like, if I can keep going, and I prayed to Krishna, I was like, Krishna, if you can heal this, then I promise I'll keep trying to do more service, even if I'm afraid. Oh boy, do not pray to Krishna, because he will answer very quickly. I had no expectation this is what he was going to send my way. So my husband always says, he's like, he's always very careful about what he prays to Krishna, because he's like, I've seen what he's done with you, right? so I want to be careful. Yeah, but it is hope given, right? Because Krishna, when we pray to Krishna, he may not give you what you want, but he's going to give you what you need, right? And then in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in the introduction, and this I'll paraphrase because it's a long quote, but Prabhupada is talking, he's quoting Srila Rupa Goswami,
And Srila Rupa Goswami's being asked, like, how can we remain uncontaminated in this world? How can we do that? If we have to interact with this world. And he says, if we simply go about what we're doing when our ambition is to serve Krishna, if at every moment we're saying, how can I serve? How can I serve? And he says, if we use everything in the service of Krishna, if we simply speak to other people about Krishna consciousness, we are rendering service, right? If we put our mind, our senses, our speech, our money, our energies, are all engaged in the service of Krishna, then we're no longer material nature. Other people may think we are and may see us, and again, we'll forget and then we'll go back and forth, right? But in that moment, we're in Krishna consciousness and we can really transcend the platform of material nature. And the reason why I share this is because the beauty of Krishna consciousness, the beauty of bhakti, is that ultimately it's so practical. It's simple for the simple, as Srila Prabhupada has said, and complicated for the complicated. Exactly. So we can be in this material world and not be contaminated by it if we go around asking ourselves in every moment, how can I serve you, Krishna? And from my personal experience, it's even, I wouldn't say better, but it's definitely yields more results if you're doing it in the worst moments of your life. When you're really, really having that pain, either emotional, physical, wherever you're having challenge, and you say, how can I serve you, Krishna? And I love how simple it is that even if you just talk to someone about Krishna consciousness. So my husband and I, we do self-prasadam distribution. I don't know if anybody else does self-prasadam distribution. So there's a vegan potluck that we go once a month. And sometimes we're the only devotees there, sometimes there's other devotees there, but for the most part, it's people who know nothing about Krishna. And we always bring prasadam, of course, to distribute. And people may know that it's prasadam or they may not, but they're getting that mercy. And it could just be as simple as that. So, and sometimes, especially my husband, he loves wearing t-shirts with like either Jagannath or Lord Nrsimhadev, and that will always bring up a conversation, and then somebody will ask, and then we'll be able to talk about Krishna. Not in a really heavy way, but just like they ask us. Like literally Krishna gives us the opportunity to do that service. We're not even pushing it on anyone. So again, to bring it back, it's that submission, submitting to Krishna's will and recognizing our sacred smallness. As Rukmini Walker Prabhu always likes to say, she always says, let's recognize our sacred smallness. And recognizing it and saying, how wonderful is Krishna. Can you say it all with me? Because I feel like that has to be said. How wonderful is Krishna. Right? How wonderful is Krishna. That we are so small. We are so conditioned, and he still loves us so much. How can I ever thank him or my spiritual teachers except with loving submission and devotional service? And as a disclaimer, again, I keep coming back to this word submission because I also attend, so I listen to this class usually on YouTube, and I also attend daily a Zoom class, a Srimad Bhagavatam class with the Bhakti Center in New York City, which is where my husband and I originally are from. And when the word submission comes up, a lot of the new people get really, really triggered by it. They have a really hard time with it. They say, oh, it has tones of abuse and war, or they feel like it's someone being forced to do something. So I bring this up because I know a lot of them in their support of me are maybe listening to this class. And I think it's also important for us to unpack these words that create those kind of negative reactions in people, because we know that it's coming not from that space. And that remind ourselves that there's no abuse, there's no being forced to do something when it comes to the Lord, right? Because love requires free will, right? Krishna does not want robots. Krishna does not want mindless slaves. right? He wants us to choose to serve him. He wants us to choose to love him, right? And when we were having this class in the Bhakti Center, Srimad Bhagavatam class, someone beautifully gave the example of thinking of submission as a child submitting to a loving parent, right? When we are a child and we know that our parent loves us so much and will always care for us, how easy is it for us to just lift up our arms and say, carry me. I trust you. I love you. So if we think of that word submission in that sense, and we think of Krishna in that sense, then we can very easily, lovingly submit and serve with devotion the Lord. So to wrap things up, because I definitely want to leave room to hear from all of you beautiful Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, I wanted to share, again, in honor of being in this August assembly, one of your god sisters, Pranada Kamtoy Prabhu, she wrote a writing for this beautiful poetry book called Bhakti Blossoms, a collection of contemporary Vaishnavi poetry. And I felt like we couldn't finish the class without bringing up Radha. And I wanted to read her quote about Radha. Radha's supreme example demonstrates the most magical aspect of bhakti, how giving becomes receiving when we offer our love to the perfect object of love, our supreme source. Radha is the emblem of a perfect giver. No matter how much she gives, she is never depleted, but remains always blossomingly, brilliantly in the highest ecstasy, ever displaying the perfection of giving to the fully capable object of love. By engaging one's heart, mind, body, and words in the service of Krishna, we will never be drained, reduced, or depreciated. He is ever grateful, generous, sweet, and responds with utmost attention to each of us individual souls according to how we love him. Radha entreats us to experience this for ourselves. So to recap, dear devotees, we talked about the solutions to our false ego and forgetfulness, which is listening to the Lord with loving submission and devotional service to Krishna with love, choosing love, and ultimately it comes down to listening, loving, submitting, devotional service, and not to end it like a song, but love, love, love. So again, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They can fulfill the desires of everyone. Just like the Zaya trees, they are full of compassion for the fallen, conditioned souls. So please, what are your takeaways, questions? I will do my best. Comments or corrections, I welcome them. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, DamodarPriya.
I was like, where's that voice coming from?
Here I am. Really, you're just effervescent. Really, very, very nice. Thank you for taking that step.
Oh, now I can see you. Sorry, I need my glasses for this, but I don't need this anymore.
But I do have a question. How do we strike a balance between letting go and let God, and God helps those who help themselves? You know what I mean? Does one, in that mood of, I'm not the doer, Krishna's the doer, so why do I have to, do I have to do anything? Want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question because I've asked that many a time to both my spiritual teacher, and I think I'm one of those annoying people that attend Srimad Bhagavatam classes and like to get the same, I'll ask the same question to different teachers just to see if I can get a different kind of angle on it. So I've asked that many times, and what I've heard is it all comes down to discernment. It all comes down to discernment, and it also comes to us having sage counsel, right? And being able to surround ourselves by devotees who we trust that can always offer us their advice as to when we've reached our limit of what we can do. right? And I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but that's what I've been told when I've asked. And also just knowing that really Krishna wants us to try. Really, Krishna wants us to try. And just like so my background is as a teacher. In this lifetime, I've never had the privilege of having human children. I do have some spirit souls in dog bodies at home who we left listening to the Maha Mantra. But I know that as a teacher, even though I knew that I was fully capable of doing everything myself, right? I know the alphabet, I know how to do arithmetic and all these things. I always appreciated when my students made that effort to try, or when they wanted to help. And then I knew as a teacher when they were at their limit, right? It's called, in teaching, it's called scaffolding. When you know, okay, that child has reached their limit. If they go any further, then it's going to be frustration. So Krishna knows that. And sometimes if we don't have a way to hear Krishna in our heart, then he'll work through the people around us, right? Either guru or our very close friends or other devotees or sometimes just random people, right? Krishna will work through random people. So we do our best, and then Krishna will meet us at that point before we get frustrated if we're open to it. Does that help at all?
Excellent.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Anybody else? Yes? Oh, sorry.
So thank you for being so clear on those main points, about love and submission. I've been reading Chaitanya Charitamrita and the talks between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy, which is just so beautiful. I think I'll have to read it again when I'm done with that section. But just reading how the gopis, that they would rather serve Krishna and make arrangements for Radha, to be with Krishna, rather than themselves be with Krishna. And Radha actually also enjoyed making arrangements for the gopis, to be with Krishna. So just that uniting someone else with Krishna was like their highest pleasure. So I was thinking, like, for ourselves, when you're doing your prasadam distribution and when we're going out and we're trying to, connect people in that mood, that it's so pleasing to Krishna. We're trying to unite people with the Supreme Person of Godhead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I really love that. And one other thing that I wanted to mention, when, somehow I was teaching a Bhakti Shastra course to some women in Mayapur, and I had them illustrate a verse, or a concept. Oh. So one of the concepts was that idea of if someone that's bound, they can't help someone else who's bound. Mm-hmm. There has to be someone who's unbound that helps. Yeah. So the way this group illustrated it, maybe let's say there's 5 people in the group, so 4 of them had their arms, straight down to their sides, and they were rolling on the ground. And they were trying to help each other become unbound, but of course that was impossible. But it was so funny to see it. We were just all laughing, and then finally the 5th person came, who was, personating the guru, and was able to help them, become unbound. So, anyways, okay,
just be warned that I'm going to use that in the future. I love that example. Thank you, Sukata Prabhu. And thank you again, because if it weren't for Sukata Prabhu, sharing the classes that I did for the Bhakti Center with Mukhya Prabhu, then I would not be able to do the service today for all of you, so thank you. She always believes in me. Yes.
Hare Krishna. In the purport of this text 32, which you covered 31, first point, of course, is the false ego is considering that I'm the God, I'm this body. Mm-hmm. So then Srila Prabhupada is writing here that there are 2 things. One is he starts with fruitive activities. Person starts, and then he says that when the person is frustrated with fruitive activities, because fruitive activities means gain something. I'm doing this business to make a profit. That's fruitive activities. I'm working, so I'm going to get money at the end of the weekend for my Sanskrit, whatever it is, to maintain. But then he is writing that when the person is frustrated with fruitive activities, he says he becomes a philosophical speculator. Now, the philosophical speculator means understood that ultimately that I'm God. That's the last snare of mine. So question is, I'm trying to understand this clearly, because usually when person is in fruitive activities, when he's really gains something. He gains power, he gains money, he gains property, he gets everything. Then he wants to think, and he thinks I'm the doer, because he gained everything. And he gained everything, then he thinks that, well, I'm the doer and I'm the Lord. So I don't understand here, because here it says that when he's frustrated with fruitive activities, then he becomes philosophical speculator. And philosophical speculator thinks that he's God. I'm a little bit confused in this purport.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And just to make sure that I understood your question correctly. So what I heard you say is that in the purport, Prabhupada's saying that someone thinks that they're the doer because they gain so many things from their fruitive activities. However, because they become frustrated with the fruitive activities and the material gains, then they become philosophizing, and they think that they're God. Is that correct? Like, how could that two be? Like, what's the paradox?
Usually, when you perform fruitive activities, anything, business, job, whatever you do, corporate level, then you become rich. You have everything. You have everything you have, right? Materially. So then, everybody is working under you.
Yeah.
So there can be possibly thinking that I'm God.
Well, there's so many examples of that in
But
real life right now.
how is that he's frustrated from fruitive activities, then he comes to philosophical speculation, and then he thinks I'm a God. So how is that one?
So the way that I understood it, and if anybody else has a different way to hear it, please let me know. But the way that I understood that when I read it is that you can gain all these things, but you become, you get so much greed. Like the greed just grows and grows and grows, and your ego grows with what you gain. So as the false ego grows, because I have all these things, they get frustrated because it's never enough, right? It's like a bottomless hole. They can't fill it. And I know that I try not to read the news and stuff because it's just so negative, but I've personally seen examples of people in real life who are billionaires who are going about, and I'm not going to name names, but who go about thinking, pretty much acting like they're God. Like they think they're God. They think that they can, do all these things that they probably can't do, and they get to that point, and from what I've seen, just because the greed just overpowers them, and nothing satisfies them. Nothing satisfies them. They could have billions of dollars and they're not satisfied. Why? Because what's missing is Krishna. They've been doing all these things for feeding their false ego, which is a bottomless hole, as opposed to, you could be a billionaire, but if you've done it in the service of Krishna and you're using it to do devotional service with it, then you won't get frustrated. And you won't think that you're God because you know who God is. So you're doing it all for who you know God is, which is Krishna. Does that help at all? I don't know if that answers your question.
Makes some sense.
Just makes some sense. Does anybody else have something to support that? I really would appreciate it. Again, that was my understanding, but I'd love to hear other people how they understood that. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thanks for such an enlivening class. I had my comment on my own, but as Bhadra Prabhu was asking his question, the first thing that came in my mind was that Aesop's fable about sour grapes. The fox that was trying and trying and trying, but he could never reach them. So that's like the materialist trying and fruitive worker trying and frustrated. And then he ends up saying, oh well, those grapes were sour anyway. So we may not see it in one lifetime, but Prabhupada's saying repeatedly trying. So repeatedly, birth after birth after birth, trying to get ahead, and then always frustrated. Oh, actually, there's no point in trying to enjoy this material world. It's all illusion. It's all Maya. This is the viewpoint of the impersonalists. And it's a little bit like the fox that was frustrated, isn't it? So that's one thing I thought of. And then when you were describing the billionaire that can never be satisfied, I was remembering some famous person, I'm not sure who it was, but in our recent history said everyone should have a chance to become rich and famous so that they can see that's not what brings happiness.
Yes, yes.
You know, so not everybody gets that chance, but it would be, as you were saying, it's frustrating, even if you do get it.
And we saw the example of one of the well-wishers of the Hare Krishna movement, George Harrison, right? He had everything at one point, and he realized this was not going to help him and is not enough, and he gave it all up. Well, he didn't give it up, but he offered it to Krishna, and he offered it to Srila Prabhupada. Yes.
Also, the fruitive worker is in pursuit of happiness, ultimately. But because nothing can fill the God hole in the heart but God,
Yes.
until they come to that, and they may go through the path of philosophical, and rejecting the material world as Maya, like that. But until they really latch on to the path of bhakti, devotion to God, they will not find happiness.
Yes. Thank you. When I was talking about the false ego being like this bottomless hole, I was missing that God hole. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. You could see you have lots of realization, and you spoke from them, so it's very convincing. Thank you. I was thinking that lots of people have problem with surrendering to Krishna because they don't know who he is. In the material world or experiences, we surrender to this person, whether it's a husband or wife or children or whatever the situation, and it's always ending on, not complete happiness or frustration or whatever. So that's why it's very important to understand who Krishna is. That's why we have 9th canto telling us who Krishna is. When you find out how he's so beautiful, how much he loves us, then of course you want to surrender. Where else is there a person like that? So sometimes when you get to new people, we don't preach surrender. We want to tell them who Krishna is. And when you tell them, you say, oh yeah, I want to know more about this person. Who is this person?
Yes.
So then surrender will come naturally, or at least they'll want to, surrender because, oh my God, he owns the world, he loves me, he's this person. Sure, who doesn't want Krishna to be their best friend?
Yes.
He's already our best friend, but we don't know it. So when you get to know them, because our whole religion is based on relationship.
Yes.
We can go around and so many people die every day, it doesn't matter. But when our friend, we have a relationship that dies, then, we feel that. So Krishna, for most people, they don't know who he is. They see it, oh God, he's powerful, he's great, but what does that mean? But when we learn his true and sweet quality, they have a song, they say, Krishna is so sweet, everything, his smile is sweet, his voice is sweet. When you hear that, it brings that, flowing emotion. Yeah, let me get to know this person. Yeah. So that's what we want to do. Because surrender, when you hear surrender, you think like, oh, surrender, I'm going to be under this person, But when you know who the person is, yes, I want to be under this person. So that's why it's so important to tell them who Krishna is. Surrender, when you hear the term surrender, they go, all right, I would surrender, but let me know who this person is. So we need to, tell them more about Krishna.
Yes.
Many people, they say they come first to the temple, they don't even see the deities. They see bright lights, they see all this stuff. And when you get to know who Krishna is, beautiful, you start seeing. You know.
I love that. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Because it's really true, right? Like bhakti is personalism. It's radical personalism. We're not loving an idea. We're loving a person. We're loving two people. Two beautiful people who love us so very much.
It starts with an idea because you're here.
Yeah.
But the relationship is so important.
We can only have a relationship with a person.
Right.
Yeah, not an idea.
Right.
I can't have a relationship with this. I can have a relationship with people though. Thank you so much. Take turns.
Thank you, Sukita, for encouraging her to do this. Nice class.
Oh.
Yeah, it's nice. And this is a letter, Prabhupada, a quote from a letter from 68. It's about japa, and it's about remembering and forgetting. And Prabhupada says, during japa you say, "My dear Krishna, please remind me to always chant your holy name. Please do not put me into forgetfulness. You're sitting within me as super soul, so you can put me into forgetfulness or into remembering you. Please do not put me into forgetfulness.
Yes.
Please always remind me to chant. Even if you send me to hell, it doesn't matter, just so long as I can always chant Hare Krishna."
Yes,
Thanks
you so
for the
much for
class.
sharing that.
Give more classes. You should come out once a week and give a class.
I'm sorry that that may not be physically possible, but I will do my best as long as I can. But I wanted to just reflect on that because when I became really, really ill, the first time that I became really, really ill, the only thing that was helping me through it was to continue to chant. And I couldn't even hold my beads. My husband can attest to that. And I would freak out because I couldn't count how many rounds I was doing. I didn't know I was getting through it. And he's so amazing. And he would say, "Krishna doesn't care. He doesn't care. He just wants you to chant." And I did. And and it was being able to not forget Krishna in those moments are the most beautiful moments. So thank you for sharing that. I'm so grateful that the class has animated so many of you to share. That's great. As a teacher, I know some of the hardest parts is when you give a class and then the students just stare back at you with just blank expressions and they're like, I don't know what to tell you, teacher. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're contagious.
But not COVID. I don't have COVID.
Hare Krishna. So, as I said before, I had my own comment, but I was previously responding to Bhadra. But I really appreciate your reading that passage from Vishaka's book. And especially, I was struck by her amazing attitude that we can have affectionate well-wishing, even for someone who's acting with an inimical attitude towards us. So that's probably one of the most difficult things, particularly among, say, devotees. It's easier to be kind to someone who's really ignorant. But can you give any advice or reflections?
Oh, Krishna. You know, so my name is H.G.DamodarPriya Devi dasi, right? So as you may have guessed, my guru gave me that name because I love baby Krishna. And I just love how baby Krishna is so mischievous. And he always will bring up something for what I'm being challenged with. So you're asking this question, and I can totally see baby Krishna behind you going, because that's something that I'm working on right now. So my husband and I, we, by Krishna's mercy, we bought our first home and hopefully our forever home here in Alachua. We're both in our 40s. So, and we were so excited to have this home, to have our deities there, and to be so close to the temple. And then Krishna brings in the challenge of our neighbors. And our